I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I feel like it was something they said publicly, so I don't think anyway. There was a rumor at Render that next year would be a single track conference. And
Interesting.
I don't know why or like the details of that. And again, I think that's just a rumor, so I don't actually know if that's true or not. But that was what I heard from a few different people as a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to each. That's interesting.
I know a lot of like the pro is you have so many people, like you can have so many amazing speakers. The con is like then you have to choose which one of them that you go to, right? Because you can't go to see multiple people at the same time, which is really tough.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I know I like attending single track conferences, but then you have to attend more to see, all the different people that you want. But yeah, I'm not sure from an organizational standpoint what's the most beneficial.
Yeah.
And you're in constant FOMO.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which track should I be in? Which track?
Especially working a conference that big, that was so many great speakers. I was just like, oh, I just want to run away and go see everybody and go talk to everybody, and didn't really get to until like the second half of the second day, which still really just was so energized, and so many people were so excited. So it was still really a lot of fun.
Yep. Especially working a booth is tough. I haven't had to do it in a while, and I'm mostly happy about that, just because it takes it, like it limits you from what you're able to do. But that also is like an easy way to just have conversations with people too.
It is. They come to you.
Yes. Yeah.
You hold the swag. They will appear.
Yep. Chrissy on Twitch, Jessa Dev on Twitch, Ricardo on Twitch. Morning. Akshay and S Chassis on YouTube. S Chassis asked about anyone hiring. I don't know that any of us are hiring right this second, but if you want to share details about what type of role you're looking for, that would be good context to have. Job portals, I'm not sure where to go for that. We post jobs in our Discord when I come across them, so that may be a place that would be helpful. I can't click on, unfortunately, the link from Chrissy in the chat just because of the way StreamYard does stuff. Let me see if I can open up Twitch to that. But
hey, Chrissy.
Chrissy is referring to our wins of the week, which we do in Learn, Build, Teach Discord every Friday.
I love that. I haven't been able to join any of those calls in quite some time. I've been very busy at work. I haven't been in any other servers much lately, sadly, but hoping to get back into the communities again.
I know what it's like. And it's been like, this is my first time being on a stream in a month, right? I think. So I've done a few things internally with Discord. So I've been back kind of doing those. And this is my first time being in public, but I spoke at Render, so that was very public, but on a live stream. So I'm very excited to like have people talking to, and then also people in the chat that are here hanging out with us as well. So
it's a good question from Kevin down there. I don't know if I know Kevin, but it says, I've never been to a conference. What's some advice to experience a conference to the fullest? I say, see if you can connect in advance in any way with anybody that you know that's going, any speakers. Some speakers are really open to chatting and getting to know people. See if there's anybody that you can make a connection with prior to. Definitely, if it's multi-track, have your list already of what you absolutely want to see, and just talk to people. The biggest benefit I've ever gotten out of conferences is, of course, the sessions are amazing, but it's really all the conversations and all the people that you meet outside of that. And then, of course, give yourself some time to rest, too, because you'll get burnt out if you try to do every single thing. So definitely prioritize. What else do you guys think?
So embracing what you just said, one of my pieces of advice is like talk to and engage with as many people as you can, go to as many activities as you can, while also making sure to take breaks and time for yourself. Because I'm a very extroverted person. Like I get energy from being around other people. A lot of people that you think are that way are actually not that way. And it actually takes a lot of mental capacity and stress sometimes to be in that situation. Taylor Dustin is my favorite example of that. He's everywhere during the day and he talks to everyone. He's one of my favorite people in the world. And then at like 6:30 or 7, he's like, I gotta leave. I can't like hang out with you anymore because I'm so exhausted. So like pay attention to your personal levels and how much you can do. And within that like safe range of time and mental capacity, do as much as you can. Go and talk to as many people as you can. Sit down at a random lunch table. And then I love what you said about like kind of researching beforehand who to meet. Yeah. I have an advantage now of like having been to a bunch of conferences. So I show up and I know I've got friends there. But especially if you don't have that kind of friendship circle built in yet, doing some research, send people a DM on Twitter. Just, hey, I'm gonna be there. Like, I'm so excited to meet you, and make sure you find those people. And there are often so many people that you want to meet, and I'm in this situation as well. Taking notes of that is super, super helpful, because I'll have conversations with people on Twitter of like, can't wait to see you there. And then I completely forget, like, just contextually who or why. And then I show up and then I'm awkward. Anyway, make notes so you like have something that you can refer back to of who you're going to meet and hang out with.
And other attendees, especially if you're going alone and you don't maybe a city you've never been to and you're not sure who's going, like in any communities you're in, just kind of blast out, be like, hey, is anybody else going to this conference? Like, see if you can connect with some other people just to hang with too in between, so you don't feel like lonely, especially if you're less inclined to maybe walk up to a group of people and say hi.
Yeah, and if you kind of struggle with like introducing yourself, I think it sometimes helps to like almost rehearse an elevator pitch, like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I work here, I'm into this. Yeah. And that way you can just kind of like fall back on that to like inject yourself into a conversation if need be. And I also always bring this with me. It's like this little background with a QR code.
Such a good idea.
Cute. I was thinking how badly I needed one of those at Render. So many people would be like, oh, okay, like how can I quickly connect with you? I'm like fumbling on my phone. I was like, man, I work in tech. This is sad. There's a solution for this problem.
Yeah, just build it yourself. It was a super fun little project. And like then that in and of itself sparks conversation too, which is great.
I feel like
bring demos of stuff, people love to see stuff.
That would be a perfect tiny app idea, Brad. It's just like, give me a logo that you want and like a background color and a link that you want me to link people to, and then I'll give you like the vertical
an iPhone,
an image that you can use as your background. That's such an easy thing, and it's every time I see that, I'm like, that's the best idea. It's so simple, like it's so simple, but it's like absolutely the best idea to have something just like ready to go for people.
It just saves on the awkwardness of like exchanging information, and like we're not using business cards anymore.
Well, I mean, I think Apple pretty much killed that app idea at WWDC. They did the NFC contact swapping thing now. So like,
I didn't know that. Jonathan Powers said, noticed random live stream, decided to join.
Welcome.
Hello, welcome. So glad you did. I'm curious, for people that I may not have context for, like if you're kind of new to the stream, if you want to give me some context of like what you do, are you a developer? Are you aspiring developer? Are you completely not developer related and just kind of like tuned in randomly and just kind of curious what people are saying and talking about? Any context people are comfortable sharing, throw that in the chat. I'd love to hear and read that. And what we're talking about, we've got 2 guests today from Wix, and we're talking about, like, in my mind, like this huge transition for Wix of being the super well established product. Maybe I should save like my pitch for like the actual podcast, but super established in a specific area of website builder, and now branching into these specific technologies and features and products that are geared towards developers, which makes me happy. And I've gotten to try some of these out and meet the team a few different times, virtually and in person. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about, the kind of that transition, some of the specifics. So if people have questions and comments and ideas or whatever, just throw that in the chat. That's the kind of stuff that I think makes live streams the most exciting for me, is knowing that people across the world are like paying attention and engaged with what we're doing. So Jonathan is a WordPress developer. Awesome. So maybe we'll take a minute to like do a compare. Not that we don't need to pitch people, but like we could do a compare contrast of like features in Wix and headless CMS stuff that we'll talk about. And
I have a lot of experience with WordPress in the past too. So I'm pretty familiar with kind of like the different reasons you might choose one or the other. It depends. It all depends. That's the famous developer phrase. It always depends.
I know. Which is 100% the right answer, because if someone gives me a definitive answer one way or another, I'm like, you probably are missing some. Jessa is in Nashville, or no, in the live where company Zeal is based. Zeal is based in Oregon. Amy lives in Nashville. Cool. Anyway, that's awesome. Great to have that context front end of. And Derek, who's active in Discord, learning front end web development now, working through React. Fun stuff. Awesome. Cool. So again, if people have questions, throw them in the chat. Let us know if you have things you want us to stop and elaborate on. Any of the above, let us know. And if you all are ready, let me get my music queued up. I'll go ahead and kick us off and we can get started. So welcome everyone to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the new Wix for developers.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compressed.
What's up, everyone? My name is James Q. Quick, and I am a full-time technical content creator.
Hey, everybody. My name is Brad Garapi. I'm a software developer, front-end software developer at Atlassian.
And we have two amazing guests from Wix. Again, we're talking about like this big transition that Wix, I would not just has gone through, but is going through of like really embracing the developer community. There's also one thing I want to call out in a second, like a really random story that changes my perspective on Wix from like 3 years ago to now, which is, anyway, it'll be interesting. So welcome to the podcast, both Tom and Amanda. Amanda, do you want to kick it off and introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your background?
Yeah. I actually have my own interesting first experience with Wix and then like ended up working for the company. So it was really like an interesting evolution for me between like the time that I first used it ever and kind of like what I'm a part of now. But yeah, so my background as far as software development and web development is concerned, I've been working in dev for about 6 years now before I then transitioned to developer advocacy. Started in the kind of C#.NET world, then had to do a little bit of CMS development like your Joomla, your WordPress, your Drupal. Got into a little bit of Angular and React. So I've worked in a little bit of everything. But what really always gave me the most kind of happy feelings about my work was whenever I was helping somebody else. Loved working with other developers as I kind of advanced, up into mid-level and then senior positions. Being able to work with junior developers on teams was more rewarding to me than actually just being somebody that made the cool feature. So I started kind of looking around and ended up finding developer advocacy as that happy medium to still stay in the tech, but also kind of really focus on empowering other developers to get their own wins and make it less about me and more about them. And I am located in the US. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, which is on the East Coast, if you're not familiar. And yeah, I've been Wix for a little over a year and a half now. It's been an exciting ride so far.
That's awesome. And Tom, welcome to the podcast. You want to introduce yourself as well?
Thank you so much for having us. Sure. I'm what you might consider to be a long-time Wixer. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary last month.
Wow.
So that's been quite a journey for me. I've seen the company grow from like 400 employees to like 6,000. The user count as well, like swelling up in insane degrees. And kind of been there for the journey. Seeing Wix change across the years, morph. Kind of changed myself, grew with the company, started as really kind of a script kiddie on our own internal frameworks and our own internal stuff, pre-React, pre-Angular, all sorts of cool things we're using today. At some point did a little bit of a shift to kind of help Wix grow. We opened up the Wix Academy, which is an internal R&D organization to kind of help onboard, train, and really help bring in more people to the company. While I was doing that, I also kind of got involved with a lot of community activities. So we ran YGLF, You Gotta Love Frontend, a conference all about frontend, much passion, much love, that ran for about 5 years until COVID kind of shakes things up again, shakes things up a bit. And yeah, I was organizing that for 3 years with a group of lovely characters. And these days I lead developer relations for Kodux, which is a brand new offering for developers. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. Doing that for most of my time and serving as a team lead for one of our open source projects called Stylable, kind of with the rest of my time.
Cool. It's funny, there's like so many things that are developer focused that I feel like I still don't know about. Like I remember posting something on Twitter about Wix being cool, and there was like, oh yeah, they also have this other thing and this other thing, and it wasn't Wix people talking about it. It was just the community, and I thought that was a really good example. And I'll give you like, I kind of hinted at this kind of awkward story introduction to Wix. So it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know exactly how long. And someone from Wix, it was like on the Wix account, I think, sent me a DM and said, hey, we're sending gifts to people. And I had no relationship with Wix. I had no context, honestly, for Wix. I knew what it was, but no direct correlation with Wix at all. And they sent out these like very expensive headphones. Do you know about this? Like from
I don't think they're ever going to live down that moment. I learned about it when I joined. It was before my time, but it's definitely was a learning experience for them. It sounds like. Yeah,
well, it was such an interesting thing because there was a lot of hype about it because people were just posting and confused. It's like I have these headphones and I don't really know why. So I think it definitely got some buzz. But it was an interesting introduction to me of like paying more attention to Wix. And then 2 years down the road or 3 or whatever, Amanda, we got to talk in London at not all things open at Modern Front Ends. And you were telling me about all these things, including Kodux and other things. I was like, that sounds really interesting. And so we've gotten to work some together over the past like 6 months or so. And it's been cool for me to kind of see that progression. Do either one of you want to give like what do people stereotypically think about with Wix? Like up until the last couple of years, what's been like the bread and butter with Wix?
It's your no code builder. It allowed your mom to sell her crochet and her baking online and not bother you to build her a website. It started as a no code builder and is still a really, really robust no code site builder. It's such an advanced visual drag and drop editor and has a lot of out of the box features. You could really never write a line of code and make a lot of the kind of average sites that you're going to see on the internet. But and still a lot of people think that's all we do. And that's one of the reasons you'll see us at conferences a lot. So I find that a lot of the conversations I have, and Tom will have another perspective on this, well, being like the grandfather of Wix over here in this conversation, at least in years, is that, we started there, and it started with this idea of, everybody should be able to build a website. You shouldn't have to know everything in the world to sell something online or to communicate or to connect online. That's not fair. That's a very gatekeeping thing. So let's make something that everybody can be part of this world in. But then starting in about 2017, they started opening up to, that traditional low code user, like, maybe you want to add a little bit of code. Like there's some things like the dev teams there can't build everything. They can't build everything everybody wants. There's always going to be something that somebody thinks of that we don't have a feature for out of the box. And then you get into that area. Okay, it's like, well, we can't build everything. So you start letting people build themselves. And as they opened up into this space, they just realized from internally and also just externally, people starting to use this, that this is the direction that made the most sense, and getting more and more into this. So then saying, okay, well, what does that look like for us? And now, as you've seen, we have, if you're using the managed environment, a full front end and back end experience, databases, scheduled jobs like cron jobs, everything you would need. And then, of course, with the rollout of headless, if you really just don't like a visual editor, you can make whatever front end you want now and still use all these really robust business applications that they've been building over years and years and years for the no-code users. And that's only, like you said, you find out about all these other things we're doing, and Tom will be able to speak to those. That's only one product, but that is like the bread and butter of what Wix is and what people know about or think about when they think of Wix.
I think there's like also another angle there, where Wix has a lot of accumulated know-how about visual experiences, right? We've been kind of playing with that sort of idea, that sort of experience over the last 16, 17 years that the company has been around. But all the while kind of wrapping it up in this very large scale front end kind of environment. Like Wix has hundreds of front-end developers who are creating these experiences, who are creating these features, and are completely immersed in open source and the ecosystem and kind of what we're all doing as developers. So we're able to kind of create some of the things that we'd like to use to a certain extent. Like I know a lot of very technical people who have Wix sites or other low-code sites just because they don't necessarily want to deal with the technical aspects that they do in their everyday job just for a small landing page or a small personal site or something like that. So kind of being able to have this massive front-end army of developers to craft experiences and kind of open up the platform for other people to play in offers a really interesting perspective.
I got a question for y'all in terms of the low code, no code stuff in general, particularly the low code stuff. Do you feel like that actually does a good job of teaching maybe less technical folks about how to code or opening that door?
I'll start with my perspective and see what Tom's opinion is on that. What I think, at least in the case of something like Wix, I think it's a great place to focus your learning on JavaScript and not have to say, well, I need to figure out everything about setting up a local environment, everything about setting up a deployment pipeline, advanced security, performance, all of these things. You're saying, okay, right now, I really want to focus on learning JavaScript. And that's all it's Node.js on the back end. And it's essentially a flavor of vanilla JavaScript right now for your front end code in Wix. And you're working with APIs and you're learning JavaScript. And then so it does really allow you to focus. So if you're really overwhelmed by the entire landscape, it's a great place to start. And then you might find that for what you're building, it's actually the right tool too. Or you might not, you might want to move on from there. It all depends. But I think it's a great tool for learning personally. I really enjoy it. I know I learned how to code kind of on the job. I got absorbed by a dev team because of some skills that I had. And I got thrown into C#.net at first. And I was terrified and like learning on the weekends and the evenings and just panicking all the time. And then I remember the first time they gave me like one of the WordPress sites to work on. It was a government contract. So we had all different kinds of tech. And I was like, okay, this allows me to just focus on smaller things at a time. So it is less overwhelming.
To kind of add to that, I think I've heard about a lot of developers that got their programming start from gaming. Usually in games that have like some sort of Lua editor or something like that. And the beauty of that is that, it's so scoped down to what you're dealing with. It's not the entire world. It's just this piece in front of me. And I think having a visual environment to play around and do that in without having to constantly switch context, go to the browser, go to the code, go to the debug panel, go to like jump around between 7 different tools, you're kind of left in that singular experience and you're able to I think, learn faster.
Do you find that because the target audience for these low code editors are folks maybe who are less familiar with coding, do you feel like you have to build a lot of features in to guide and teach and expose documentation and make error messages extra crisp and clear in your code editors there? Or do you try to shift how it's presented and not just like say, here's a VS Code instance, right in your Wix editor area? Is it slimmed down somehow?
I mean, I think I don't work on the documentation or anything like that, but I feel like it's good documentation kind of wherever you're coming from. The examples are very clear. The tutorials are very clear. And we have not just developer relations, but we have other, like there's a whole Wix education team for making like your longer form courses. Like there's so much, like there's a whole docs team. Like it's not like the one DevRel is doing all the docs, all the education, everything. So we actually have so many teams that focus on education. So because we do have so many different kinds of users, whether it's an advanced traditional developer coming into our system and needing to understand based on their knowledge, or someone learning, coming in, not having any context for what event handlers are or where even to put your code or what any of this means. And I think we have a good mixture. And in the community, when people come in and they ask questions, that it's clear that question is that they couldn't find the answer or that our documentation is confusing. We just get those things addressed very quickly to make sure that it's easily approachable for folks. So I'd say we do a really good job at that from my interactions with the community, at least.
In Kodux, we have a slightly different story, right? Because Kodux is a completely brand new standalone product. It's not tied to any of the existing Wix editors or anything like that. And it's really meant for React and TypeScript projects. And so the people that we get that come to us and are kind of, let's say, getting their start with front end might still be incredibly technical people. They might be server developers who are working on the back end, but occasionally have to maintain like some sort of front end or some sort of UI or dashboard to an internal system. That's a very common case. And for that audience, I think, yeah, what you described is extremely crucial, because they may not necessarily know the entire surroundings of the system or the possibilities of how it could break. So it's really important to scope down the problems, to make the errors as clear as you possibly can, to expose whatever documentation you can in that same place, in that same experience.
I love the idea of having different platforms be a gateway to development. So when I started my career as a developer advocate at Microsoft, I taught a lot in university and high school. And I did a lot of workshops where I did game development, and it was with a no-code tool called Construct 2. It's now Construct 3. But it was to create games, and you didn't have to write code, and it was JavaScript behind the scenes. It just like you press play and it ran in the browser. And it was so cool because immediately people who've never done code, never done a game, they could drop something on a screen, add like the platformer ability, add a platform, and they can jump around and have like a Mario based game. And so that feedback cycle is so quick and so like inspirational. Like when you start learning Java by itself, and no shot at this because this is how I learned, like you get to write something for the terminal and like prompt the user for a question, but you don't get to like visually see a whole lot like the impact of what you're doing. So I've always loved the web for that. And then specifically doing game development in that sense was like that gateway in my mind for students. And I think you could teach a CS 101 class easily from the concepts that are there, because they had classes, they had instances of objects, they had all these things. And so the first time that I saw, and Amanda, I'll maybe come back to you to kind of talk more about Velo, but the first time I saw Velo, it was this interesting mix of like, you could do all the visual stuff that people are used to with Wix, but then you could actually tie that to, with a couple clicks of a button, now adding custom code. And now you can start to introduce people to being a developer. And they've already had context for like what a website looks like, what buttons do. Like they already have that context, but now they can kind of translate that into code. And I feel like this is going to be one of my pitches, by the way, of like working with Wix continually, is to try to teach like a crash course on the DOM, for example, like through already having that visual editor in that context, and then layering in the code side. So anyway, I like love that ability to kind of like ease people in already having some background on as a whole what's going on with a site. So I mentioned Velo, like talked about adding custom code. Do you want to go a little bit deeper into like what Velo is?
Yeah. So for anybody on here who's not familiar with Wix, so Velo is what we call our developer environment. There was other funny marketing that you might have seen around the pandemic. It used to be called Corvid, and then originally was Wix Code, but Corvid sounded like COVID, and then
that one. Bad timing on that one.
Oh wow!
There's actually a really funny YouTube video out there somewhere of the advertising that they did when they decided to change the name, and it's we have a really creative design and marketing team that comes up with these kinds of ads when things like that you didn't expect happen to your brand. So Velo is the name of our developer environment for now. Who knows in the future? But basically, like James said, you have this entire visual environment, and you can drag all your buttons on, your containers, your repeaters, your tables, all kinds of things. You can add e-commerce, add whatever you want, all with just clicks of the button. But then once you turn on this developer environment, you then have the ability to add front-end code. You can add your typical event handlers. You can add back-end code, and you could query a database and then send some data to the front end, and then have all of your basic CRUD applications. You can build a CRUD application in no time at all. You can store secrets and then interact with third-party services and APIs. So really almost anything that you can think of that you would need to do on a website, you're able to do in there, but you, again, can focus on the logic and then what that means. And you have access to all these APIs. The thing that is a little confusing, I would say, for somebody that already knows development is that you already know how to interact with the DOM, and it's going to be a little different in this environment. Because of that visual editor. We're giving you an API interface to interact with those DOM elements. But once you understand that, it's it's the same logic you would use. It's just you just have to learn the APIs, and it doesn't really take that much time. I would say that's the only thing that trips people up just a little bit if they have any background at all, is being like, oh, how do I get to the window and things like that. But it's really cool, and it does give you that wow factor very quickly. You get to that win very quickly, and those little wins, especially when you're first learning, are what kind of give you the power to struggle through the hard parts.
Yeah.
I would love to know a little bit more about like how, Tom, you were saying React and TypeScript play a big part of the Kodux editor.
Yeah.
And well, I guess first question, is Kodux at all related to Velo? Does the Velo development environment include Kodux as like a front end editor?
I'd say we're cousins.
Okay.
We're close, but not that close. In terms of product, we are separated, right?
Okay.
Wix and its platforms and the various editors and Velo and all of that is kind of its own thing, and really the bread and butter of the company. Kodux is a standalone effort and product that is helmed by Nadav Avrahami, who is one of Wix's co-founders. And we've been working on this project for a number of years to kind of take Wix's visual know-how and visual experiences over to projects that are purely code, like they're your code.
Okay, yeah.
And so we've done a lot of work and a lot of effort into understanding how to track React and TypeScript code from the source code through transformations, through transpilations, all of that, all the way into like the runtime environment in the browser, so that we can actually facilitate an experience where you select an element on screen or in our visual IDE, and you can see which file, which line of code, where exactly that visual stem from.
Yeah. Okay, so great. Diving into that a little bit more, if you have like, let's say you started up a new React project, could you take that and then drop it into Kodux? Or do you have to kind of start with a Kodux project and then it figures it out?
So in terms of our supported technologies, React and TypeScript are kind of the must-haves.
Sure.
And once we feel more stable with React, we'll start considering which other frameworks to support ahead. But for now, it's kind of where our focus. We only released last Christmas, so we were in beta. It's completely free. But yeah, you can clone a project from Git. If you have it locally on your machine, you can just open that. Styling solutions, if it's CSS, Sass, Tailwind, the module variants of CSS and Sass, or Stylable, which is our own solution, any of those should be completely editable and like usable within the editor. And yeah, it's all about, like, we like to joke that it's not low code, it's your code. Where it's not trying to replace your IDE, it's not trying to take over your project. It's a tool that you use for specific tasks, right? And when you're working on things that are more visual, you're doing layouting, you're doing styling, you're doing composition, that sort of stuff, we feel that it makes a lot of sense to work in a visual environment.
I need a new page, and instead of like grepping around for all the different components I need and, you know, copy and pasting them into a file, you can kind of like drag it from a list of components onto a page and lay them out and then be like, okay, now maybe I can dive into the code and add some interactivity or, you know, something else.
Totally. And even like, I'll say that I'm pretty proficient in CSS, at least like on the spec level, because Stylable is a CSS preprocessor. So understanding the inner workings of the language. And even I get confused sometimes about some of the more obscure CSS properties. What's the inflex? What's the axis? What's the cross? What's like, and just having them arranged as a bunch of buttons that I can click on and see what happens is a very powerful thing.
It absolutely is. I think that would be another opportunity to do like a CSS 101 or like a Flexbox 101, like with a visual editor right there. I think would be super useful. I'm going to come back to you, Brad, but really quickly, I'm wondering if people caught Brad's reference to grepping around, and if that means something to people. How many people, like, if you're listening to the podcast after the fact, leave us a comment on Twitter or whatever, and just let us know. Do you know what grepping around means? Yes or no? And if you're watching this live, leave a comment in the chat, because I'm curious how many people can relate to that.
Wow,
that's just in my verbiage. That's it.
That's funny.
I think a lot of people like would have zero context for what grepping is, and I've never proficiently used it, but I have used it in my day. So
I literally just use it as like a turn of phrase. Do I like normally use grep ever? No, I am not like on the command line that much. So
developer talk 101.
Yeah.
Or maybe like 401 probably for grep. That's like
Yeah. Do you grok grep plugins?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right. So I was gonna kind of ask, like, I'm a very curious type of developer for any of the folks out there who are like me. Tom, if you could give like any kind of like basic explanation of how the heck Kodux would manage, React components and dragging them around to lay them out on a page. Like, I'm so curious as to how that works.
I think in general, a lot of it has to do with really being able to identify and to correlate a specific visual on screen to where it came from the source, right?
Yep.
If I'm able to see a certain div or a certain element on screen and be 100% sure that it originated from this component in this line through this expression, then really I've kind of have it sort of figured out. And the way we kind of approach that is that we have an AST representation, an abstract syntax tree for the code on the source side of things, but not in its pure state. We add all sorts of markers and trackers and things that allow us to say, oh, okay, now this line of code later on, like I'll add a comment or something to it that is completely harmless and doesn't affect what it's actually doing. But later on, I'll be able to see that comment in the runtime environment and say, oh, okay, it originated from this line or from that line. And we have all sorts of abstractions and understandings of the various languages and technologies that we support, right? So for React or for TypeScript or for CSS or for each one of the other styling solutions, you kind of need to understand the structure that you're working with, right? How you're describing that language. And then if you have the structure and if you have the trackers, then during runtime, you're able to kind of say, okay, so now if I want to drag it, that means that I need to change that line of code from this location over to this location, because I'm able to understand both the thing that I'm dragging and the thing that I'm dragging into.
I'm thinking about like repositioning something on the screen. Like if you drag it to a different spot, are you just like updating absolute CSS position values, or you're smarter than that? It's got to be smarter than that.
Or are you smarter than that?
It's got to be.
It's the question of the day.
And it is. Essentially, really, it's all about the CSS, right? If you're playing within a container that is absolute, then you're going to get one experience. If you're playing with a container that's grid or flex or something else,
cool.
You're going to get a different experience.
Yeah.
We don't have necessarily like perfect visualizers for all of these things. So like the absolute experience that you just described, which is kind of a no code, low code starting point, is something that we don't have right now. But if you were to drag something in a flex or in a grid, you would see kind of a line signifying where that would fall into. And that would, of course, be according to the correct styling properties, right? So if it's flex vertical, you'll see it down. If you'll see it flex horizontal, it'll be on the side.
I see, this is like product brain going, I see like a really good use case for a custom browser, or maybe just new browser features in, let's say, Chrome, Firefox, Safari. They already visualize grid lines. They already have the notion of content editable. What if a browser or a custom browser came out that kind of more natively supported this drag and drop in a flex group, drag and drop in CSS grid layouts? So at least now you can kind of like move things around. And then, yes, if you have the intelligence to bring those diffs back into your source code, it would be just a little bit better of a native experience. But yeah, like
I will give the browsers like a lot of credit that over the last couple of years, they've been adding some awesome DevTools features, especially around that sort of visual experience. So you kind of have like the curve editor for animations, or you have the ability to play them in 10% speed. That's super powerful, or all sorts of stuff like that. But yeah, it's really missing that that element tying it back to the source, instead of me having to figure out, okay, so this is kind of what I want. Now let me integrate that fully manually back into the code. And for now, Kodux is an application that you download and install. but we're working on the online version for that. And that would mean that you would
For
not
sure.
need to set up an environment, and you would not need to install Node or Yarn or any of those things, and just be able to kind of pop
Open and
into
go.
a project. And for people who are not developers, like other stakeholders in the project, that can be a huge barrier.
Would this then would this use like the file system APIs, the browser file system APIs, or would you target like a remote Git repository to map to the source?
I don't know that I have an official answer to give on that yet, quite.
Getting deep.
I can say that we've been looking at both approaches,
Sure.
and we've been playing around with them. The file API has some really cool stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Sadly, not supported everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's still in the works, early days. But yeah, having the ability for when working with other stakeholders, the handoff process can be so painful sometimes, right? You get a design request from a designer, you implement it, you send it back to them for them to review. They go like, no, that button is wrong. It needs to be 2 pixels to the left. You change that. Then they go, oh, but the corners are wrong and the box shadow and so on. Just let them fix it. Give them the tools, give them the environment, serve as the gatekeeper, serve as the person who's actually watching the changes and like makes sure that they're in the right places. But give them the tools to make the progress and to change things by themselves.
Yeah. That's another problem that the traditional Wix editors are attempting to solve, is the developer and designer relationship and velocity. So like our design-centric editor is called Editor X, and you can concurrently have a designer in there and a developer. The developer, if they want, can connect to GitHub, which is actually available on both editors now. So you could
Both
be working
editors
code locally. Oh,
Velo
sorry, the
and
classic
Kodux.
Wix editor.
Oh, gotcha.
There's like a classic Wix editor, and then there's what I would call like our kind of design, our supercharged design editor, because it's responsive versus adaptive. It has many more design tools that designers expect and advanced design features. But Velo is available in both editors, and it's the same experience on both of those. But one of the big differences is this ability to do concurrent editing in Editor X. So you could have your designer in there working on the UI and the developer still working on their code at the same time. And you can push these updates to each other, which is really, really great if you're trying to increase the velocity of your team. And so trying to make sure that like Tom, like with Kodux, do the tools speak to what a designer would need and what they know coming into the environment, what they're seeing makes sense to them. And then a developer is still kind of the gatekeeper of making sure everything's working and not breaking with any of these updates. But now they don't have to take that, essentially translate designs, do the best they can, then send it back and be like, is this okay? That's definitely at least in my previous dev life, it was always like, here is the design coming down from the mountain to you, and then you have to do the best you can. We didn't have a good workflow to work together.
and design tools have come a long way, right? Like in Photoshop, you still can make endless designs that you can't implement on the web. You just can't. It doesn't make sense. Or if you could, it would take you stupid amount of hours and work to do so. So like, I think Sketch maybe was the first one that kind of drove in that strong web focus in terms of the tooling and the capabilities, and Figma is now probably the leading player in that space.
Yeah.
But in terms of the relationships between the developer and the designer, there's still a disconnect there. You still have a handoff process. You still have to jump through various toolings back and forth, and that just adds drag and slows you down.
One thing I'd like to call Tom out on every time I see him, because I think it's one of the only ways right now that you could connect Kodux and its cousin Wix and Velo here, is you mentioned, or maybe it was me at the beginning of this, I'm not sure when we went live in our chat, is that we recently rolled out the ability to create headless solutions. So in that, you could have a flow where your front end is now React. Maybe you're using Kodux to design your components, and your business solutions are connected to Wix, CMS, e-commerce, and bookings. And then you have somebody, your no-code, your content creator user, making your blogs, updating your products, putting out sessions with, I don't know, Tom for expert dev advice. And so you have every single person all kind of connected through all of these tools now. But I think all of our current examples are in Next. And I don't know, are you able to support meta frameworks yet, or not so much? I don't think.
It's in
Not
the
quite.
works.
In the
It's
works,
in the
yeah. I
works.
figured it was coming. It's too popular not to be, especially with Next. But I think all of our headless examples are currently Next.js in the repos.
So with the headless part, is it specifically focused on like the content, so like blog content or e-commerce content? Does it also include components that you could build in Wix? Like, do you have the ability to pull the visual part of Wix?
No, this is
Okay.
this is completely separating the front end from the back end. So you are just pulling in. You're responsible for all of your visual if you disconnect. I don't know if there's any other plans to be able to use the Wix front end that way. I haven't heard any chatterings of that. So I can't claim to know. But yeah, this is more your traditional. Instead of just being a headless CMS, it's all of our headless business solutions, which is great, because if you don't want to build a full e-commerce backend plus a blog plus maybe event ticketing or anything else, and then we also have like, you can hook it up to an entire payment. You create login, so you're against our authentication, and then really the visual is just in whatever you want. This is really a more traditional developer tool versus somebody that's been working in the whole Wix environment and enjoys it and loves it. Maybe this isn't for them. But unless they want to expand into it. But if you came and you're like, I'm a React developer, I don't want to work in this fully managed environment, we're telling you now, well, you don't have to, and there still might be something here for you that is useful to you.
What about, I heard some really great verticals for like managed backends, a CMS, booking platforms, payment platforms. What if you just need like raw data storage? Does Wix do just like, here's a database backend and you just store whatever you want there and you make calls to it?
I guess that would be the CMS. And then you're just creating all of your tables. Our out of the box in the Wix system it's all built on top of Mongo. So it's that kind of like mental model as far as data goes. But yeah, I think that would just be the CMS.
Gotcha.
In that
so
case,
it's a very flexible CMS.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And you can make the tables however you want, have the fields and the tables connected however you want. We have support indexing and aggregation and all the kinds of advanced queries you might need if you have a lot of data. So yeah, you can just use the CMS, or you can use it with these other business solutions too, depending on your business needs.
And there is sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to add that you're kind of getting the Wix scale in the box with that, right? A platform that runs over 300 million websites has dealt with a struggle or two of scaling up and kind of solved a lot of that for you.
Yeah, you're still getting a lot of support and a lot of things you don't have to worry about for that side of your developer experience, which is great.
Now, I feel like one of the hot buzzwords in front end right now is edge.
I was just going to ask about that.
Can you run all this at the edge? And so like what's Wix's take on what can be run at the edge, or is anything coming to the edge, or any kind of distributed services like that?
Yeah. Tom, you'll have to answer that. I can't answer that right now. Do you have any insight there?
Nothing official to report back on. I know there are all sorts of eyes on this right now internally within the company, and I can say that we are extremely spread out geographically in terms of our services, in terms of where we actually run our platform. But as far as I know, that's not yet made available to users.
Gotcha.
They're kind of getting the platform as it is, sort of.
Sure. Do folks even have a choice of where to deploy like their infrastructure, or is it all on one shared infrastructure centrally hosted in like US East or something?
We have multiple places where our hosting is. I'd have to pull up the map, but I know but you don't choose. It's going to be optimized for you. That's you like to deploy on Wix, you just click a button that says publish. So we're taking care of all that for you, but it isn't just one location that it might be. And so, yeah, like when US East went down, I'm sure there was a lot of movement to get anything anywhere else when that happened. So we're not all in one place. There's no one point of failure for anything like that. But you don't necessarily know where you're deployed to.
I feel like that has become a continually bigger topic in the last several years, just in application development as a whole, like with the growth of cloud data centers that have the ability to replicate stuff across the world. The desire to take advantage of that has continued to grow. I just recorded a video on, I'm titling it like the truth about databases and the edge, because I think, like you said, Brad, like edge is a buzzword and people just immediately think edge is amazing, it's performant, it's going to do all these things for us. And the reality is, like, the other technologies that complement like hosting an application at the edge have to come along with that to be able to take advantage of it. So I'd be curious. I know, like, nothing now to say, and you're not even hinting at anything for anybody like Wix corporate if you want to question this conversation. But it'll be interesting to see like what, if anything, comes out of that potential in the next few years with Wix.
I think even when you're talking about, like, if you take another step back from that conversation, and you talk about like stuff like server components in React, right? That kind of ties into this, having the ability to have like server components and to have that on the edge and to have that like be super performant. We're still figuring out a lot of that. And by we, I mean web developers, including the React team. There's still a lot of question marks there. The official documentation isn't quite like there. So it's okay. It's still early days. And when we do it, we want to make sure we do it right. So we sometimes you need to let things stabilize just a little bit before you can start poking at them. But we are intently watching this space to kind of see what benefits we can gain from it and what benefits our users can.
I have a hot take about React server components.
I'd love to hear it.
I'm up for it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I think, you know how we took that big detour and we moved everything to client-side rendering and single-page applications and then decided to come back to the server?
Yeah.
Which before, like in the middle of that, was like static everything, which is like,
right.
And then we were like, hey, you know, it was cool when we could use the server to do stuff, and so here we are now. But yeah,
Back
keep
to
going.
PHP.
I really think that React server components is going to be like a weird detour trying to divide server rendering and client rendering, and ultimately, I think we're just going to fall back to the server at the end of it. Why? Because edge. And I think the distribution of where your server runtimes are will just essentially negate any true speed gained from this streaming of rendering. And we're going to wind up in a situation where it's like, I don't know, then just deploy the app everywhere. And that'll become so easy that it's just as fast to fully server render a page because you're hitting a data center like, 10 miles away or something.
So this video that I just did, this is like a very timely conversation. The like limitation with that, with interacting with a database, is even if you have your application deployed all over the world, if you hit the instance that's closest to you, your database also has to be close. Because if your database isn't close to the deployed instance of the application that you're hitting, you're still making that round trip potentially across the world. And so there's like catch up for databases to be able to replicate data. And it's a challenge because you want to do that in a way that like is performant in terms of eventual consistency, where you write in one place, read from another, and you want that stuff to be up to date. And like, depending on the application, they can take however much of a delay, and that's okay. But that's an interesting space for me that I'm keeping an eye on, of like, it has to be there to support all the things that you're talking about too.
Yeah, the read replica story is fairly complete, I would say, but it's the right problem and eventual consistency that it's a lot harder.
And if you're actually just adding more stops to it, then you can very easily potentially land in a space where you're like worse off than where you started, because you started at edge, then you have to travel half the world to your database and then come back and then again and again and again, and it just becomes this extra hop that works against you in some way.
And React server components don't solve that problem either. At the end of the day, so I think at this point, React server components are just trying to like speed up something that is not the bottleneck.
And I hadn't even.
There's also quick and fresh and like all sorts of interesting takes in that space.
People, I asked on Twitter the other day, just kind of a fun thing, like sum up modern web development in a sentence, and my comment was like, you don't need JavaScript ... until you do, and it's like, all these frameworks that are like trying to get rid of JavaScript as much as possible to like speed up things. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, you still need some, right? And that I think is completely understandable. But a lot of people's comments was like, overcomplicate something simple is the way I think a lot of people look at modern web development. But and I like get that perspective. But what we're doing with modern web development is we're nitpicking now is basically what we're doing of like, we could do better in this specific thing. And so because of that, we're building infrastructure, we're building frameworks, we're building tools around solving these individual problems to just like get incrementally better. Like the reality is a lot of what we would do would probably be good enough most of the time. Like what we did 10 years ago is probably good enough, but we're like really getting nitpicky. But I think that's cool too, because as you learn more about limitations of different options, you learn more about why we're doing more things and have more options and more frameworks in the future going forward, is because we're trying to solve those really small in some ways, but have a decent impact issues or limitations that we just kind of accepted for years.
I think if you want another example of that, you can look at like the CSS working group. Who've spent a very, very long time working on like grid and flex. It was those two things that they've kind of spent ages perfecting the specs on and getting them ready for the browsers and getting agreements on all of that. And they've kind of shifted approach a little bit. And over the last 2 years, we've gotten just an absolute deluge of CSS features. Which are amazing. And so many of them really do dance around that you don't need JavaScript anymore for this. You can do container queries, you can do page transitions, you can do all sorts of amazing things that we've had to implement by ourselves if we really wanted that custom bespoke experience. But now the browsers and the actual language give us so many more tools to work with. It's a treat.
Here's my future prediction. JavaScript had its major transformation with ES6. CSS is in and maybe, coming out of a major transition with just how many features they've shipped. HTML's next. The OpenUI group is going to start shipping like better, more semantic elements, things like, dialogues and modals and, better selects, date pickers and things like that. I think that's what's going to come down the pipe next.
Might even tie into things like VR, AR. Our screen sizes are getting absurd from like half an inch to like a stadium.
Yep. That'd be cool to have written a website that gets shown on a stadium screen. It is really interesting. Somebody asked this, I think, on Twitter the other day. How do you get to be the person that designs websites that like dummy websites that get used in movies? Have you ever thought about that? Like they have all these companies, like fictional companies in a movie or a TV show, and then they have like branding and they have websites and they have all these things. Like somebody actually had to build that for it to just be in a recording for a show or movie. I thought that was really interesting.
Who picks the hacker code
Yeah.
for movies?
Usually somebody who doesn't have any idea about hacking code, but yeah.
Sometimes it's somebody who has like an extreme understanding of coding, and then you find like the inner jokes, the little Easter eggs that they left in there. I ran across, I think it was on Hacker News sometime. I can try to pull up a link to it to share on the chat, of somebody who did like a deep dive on all future UI UX for sci-fi movies. So like the Blade Runner input for his car, or like the Fifth Element input of what order of buttons he has to press to make his gun work, or like all sorts of stuff around UI UX in movies, which is really cool.
I still think about Minority Report. Like Tom Cruise is standing up in there, doing his hands. Oh, I loved that. That was my favorite.
Yeah, we all thought that was our future. I'm still working on this laptop with my headphones connected to it right now.
I don't know. Vision Pro looks a whole lot like Minority Report.
It's funny. I was at Microsoft when they were working on and released the HoloLens, and the HoloLens had so much hype, and it's still like it's not even close to being a mainstream thing. Like I don't know. It's interesting how much companies put into selling something that they're still not really ready to do at scale, and consumers just aren't there either. I mean, I guess you have to you have to shoot your shot and see like
It
what
was
people respond
pricey.
to and when. HoloLens was expensive, but there's been like AR, like in my mind, AR still hasn't done very much in 10 years, right? Like it's not a mainstream thing. You see some things in like arcades now, right? Like where they have like headsets and stuff that you can wear, but it's still not something I think about on a regular basis at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those experiences where any sort of detracting factor can really, really, really harm the experience. If you have just a little bit of lag, if you have just a little bit of screen rolling effect, if you have all sorts of things, and it means that, you're playing with technology that is super cutting edge and super expensive. I remember from the John Carmack keynotes that he used to do at Facebook around the Oculus and that sort of stuff. And he was talking about how he got to experiment with like gimbals and sensors that are like from rockets or aviation or something like that, where they're like $50,000 a sensor or stuff like that. And within a couple of years, like the mobile sensors kind of passed that in terms of performance and cost. So it's not there yet, but I think a lot of very exciting things are going to happen in that space within the next 10 years. And maybe the next time we'll all talk, it'll be like in this virtual pub or something.
Could be.
Maybe.
Absolutely. And even with that, there's still never. It's just hard to replace being there in person, I guess. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like with people, like in COVID, people did a lot of virtual conferences and they had a lot of platforms where you could like sit down at a table and like see other people's camera and like jump from table to table, and it's still just not the same. Which going to Render a couple weeks ago was like hugely exciting for me. Brad and I did that conference in Austin back in January. I'll give a shout out. That conference, Wisconsin, is coming up in July. That's one of my favorite like series of conferences. Clark Organizers is a good friend of mine. He's also my coffee sponsor, which I haven't referenced, but I have coffee from him / that conference, which is amazing. So people should check that out. But yeah, anyway, so just like my personal note, Tom, Amanda, it was great to see you in person a couple weeks ago. I am looking forward to whenever the next time is that we get to do that. And
hopefully soon.
I know. I've got a couple planned for the rest of the year. My wife and I are pretty adamant of like we want to continue to do as much of the things that we had already been doing before baby after. Like we want to travel and like we'll figure it out. It'll be a little bit of a challenge, but we want to continue to do that stuff. So
I think you have plenty of people on the conference circuit interested in meeting your baby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Free babysitters everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't that be the day? Like I just show up to a conference and then everybody else like takes 5 minutes a turn and I never have to.
Blank onesie, we'll all put stickers all over.
That should be a booth activity. We've talked about
sticker the baby.
Yeah, like use hand sanitizer beforehand or something.
Please,
but like,
oh my goodness,
sticker the baby would be perfect. I like it.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't keep people up for this, and I didn't think about this at all beforehand. Being out of the podcast for a few weeks, but we usually end this with picks and plugs, where we pick something that we've enjoyed, something that we watched, something that we've read, bought on Amazon is usually what it comes down to for us, and then something we want to plug. We can edit this out too. I'll give us the out because I'm not prepared. I could come up with something. I haven't thought about it. Do we want to try to do picks and plugs for everybody?
I definitely have nothing off the top of my head.
I have something. But
all right, Tom, you can speak on behalf of Wix.
Yes.
All right, so no pressure. Right?
No pressure at all.
Let's do at least that one. Brad, do you have anything too?
Yeah, I definitely have a pick.
Cool. Okay. All right. Let's do picks and plugs. Ashley can edit that in any way that makes sense, or just leave it all in. I think it's fun. Tom, do you want to kick us off with picks and plugs?
Sure thing. I have one pick and one plug. For the pick, I'll go for recency here. Only last night did I get to see John Wick 4.
Nice.
And I enjoy that cinematic universe so much. Just, I don't know, they give off such a strong vibe using so few words. It's like the epitome of show don't tell. I think somebody said, I read somewhere that like Keanu said something like 380 words throughout the entire movie. That's it. And yeah, I don't know, just had a lot of fun with that one and all of the Wick movies. And it's not a Wix thing. It's not a Wix thing. It's not a John Wicks thing.
John Wicks.
John Wicks.
That's so good. It totally should be. You should have like a John Wick booth engagement in the future.
We should definitely have an ad that's for John Wicks.
Mhm.
How was it? How was it compared to the other ones?
On point. On point.
Yeah.
Good.
I think.
Alright.
Yeah. The first one was, it's always the breath of fresh air and,
Yeah.
and the one that stays with you. 2 was nice. 3 was nice. 4 was excellent. Yeah.
I'm
really
like,
enjoy those.
I'm not an action movie guy. I say, but like I loved every John Wick movie. It was just like
Same.
pure action, nothing but action, unashamed action. I'm like, yeah.
But the settings are also crisp
know,
and so
yeah.
nice, and that
Yeah.
techno, like, I don't know, almost Blade Runner like soundtrack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, really did the trick for me.
That's cool. I've never seen any of those, which maybe I should check them out.
They're fun, definitely.
Yeah.
They're really fun. Extremely violent, but very fun.
Fair enough.
And in terms of my plug, I've thrown the name around a little bit, Styleable, and I do serve as team leader for that project. But just to give a couple of words to explain a little bit of what it is. So that is our own homegrown CSS preprocessor from Wix. It was created very much to address a lot of the problems or a lot of the pain points that we were experiencing as we were kind of scaling up our infrastructures and features and everything to do with styling within the company. And it's really, I think, a fresh take on CSS or how to do CSS. First, in that it is very, very component oriented. As opposed to document oriented or kind of something along those lines. So the idea is that you would create a style sheet for any component, and that style sheet would be scoped and namespaced and safe for use. But beyond that, it's also treating the styling for those components as what we call style API. And that means that the styling structure or the styling definitions, at least on the interface level, if we're talking classes, states, variables, that sort of things, those are a part of a component's API. A component's API don't end with props over in JavaScript side. How you style it and how you can style it is very much a part of that same contract. And so you can think of Styleable a little bit like TypeScript for CSS, in that each one of those style sheets would represent an interface for a component, would represent the shape of the type of that component. And so you're able to define classes and variables and states and mixins and all of that. But then you're able to target all of those externally, right? You're able to have kind of this interface that would let you from the outside drill into a component and say, oh, inside this gallery, there's a button, and inside that button, there's an icon. I want to target that icon, and be able to do that with complete type safety, with auto completions, with diagnostics in your IDE, with all of that good stuff. And at the end of the day, we're also able to do some pretty wicked optimizations because we understand kind of the relationships between the various style sheets and components. And so we're able to do things like tree shaking, but for CSS, where components that don't actually get used don't get loaded, and stuff like that. It's a fresh take. We haven't done a lot of advocacy for it. It's been around for a long time. We've been working on it for like 6-7 years at this point. It's powering over 50 million websites at Wix. Probably a lot more these days. That number is a bit dated. So yeah, we just haven't really gotten a lot of time to advocate for this. This is kind of, we've been developing it full time, but the advocacy kind of fell to the side a little bit. And I'm excited to hear what people think about it. We have a Discord, we have a Twitter. You can talk to us, Styleable.io. We would love to hear what people think.
Love that. I feel like that's where, like, so many of the most amazing products come from companies building their own solution to a problem, right? Like that's not a unique problem for Wix. I guess it is, like, in scale probably, but like other companies have that problem, but you solved it, right? And solved it for yourself in a way that makes sense for other people. And I feel like that's always like one of the best indicators of or reasons for building a product is the problem exists and now you're building the solution.
We felt the pain.
Yeah.
We felt the pain. It was real.
Super cool. Brad, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I've got to pick. I got a Nintendo Switch like a couple
Nice.
weeks ago, mostly for this traveling trip. We went to Cancun and I needed something to do on the airplane. It's been amazing. But
Nice.
Zelda came out and I've been playing Zelda. And like
Awesome.
it's my first Zelda game ever, so I didn't really know what to
Whoa.
expect. Oh my god, it's
still loved
so
it?
good.
Yeah.
Like the developers, the game designers just knew what they were doing. Like holy cow. Been loving the game so far. I'm like probably 25 hours in. I'm not even
Wow.
close to accomplishing anything. It seems like I've got
Wow.
ages
There's-
left to go.
I remember
And you
when
jumped
Breath.
straight into Tears of the Kingdom?
Yes.
That's
Yes. This is my first
crazy.
one. Yeah.
I remember I haven't tried Tears of the Kingdom yet. I don't have a Switch yet, but I remember when Breath of the Wild came out and just being fascinated by the grass and like how the wind blows and the grass moves. Like I was just like, it was like, this is so beautiful. And I'm sure this new one has even surpassed how like just awestruck I was with the design of that game.
And it's so crazy because it doesn't have like super advanced graphics or anything, but it's just the art direction and the style of it all that does look really, really good.
Cool.
It's so wholesome.
Yeah,
The
is.
world and the stories for the
It
whole
is.
Zelda just the whole arc is really, really great.
I've
But it
never
was a
played
weird-
one of those either. I feel so left out.
It was a weird game to learn because I was constantly getting like just smashed by these big monsters until I kind of realized like go somewhere else. You can the world is gigantic. I shouldn't be here right now. The game does this good job of like hinting at you like, yo, like you're
You're not
gonna
ready.
get smashed, go somewhere else, explore, and then you like find the one item or the one sword or the one strategy, and you're like, I get it. I can go kill this guy, no problem now. And so it feels so good to go back to the things that you stumbled upon too early and, take down these big monsters and feel powerful that way.
It's fun.
I've been avoiding getting the new Zelda simply due to concerns for my calendar. Yeah.
You need time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I haven't been doing much coding outside of work lately. Let's put it
It's
that way.
okay.
I'll be honest, after this trip with render and everything, I think maybe now's a good time.
Yeah.
I think that would make sense. Brad, do you have a plug?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's put it this way. I'm playing Zelda and not making YouTube videos, but if you want to go subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Brad Garapi.
I love it. I am
Fantastic.
like, for the first time in a very long time, I haven't published a video in 2 weeks. I think I'll get back on next week, but that's a long break for me. I'll do a quick pick and plug for myself. So pick is, I've always been a fan of the National Treasure movies. Like I've always loved like the Dan Brown series. I've gotten into like reading, I don't know what the category is, like archaeological fictional thrillers, like in the Dan Brown like kind of area. Anyway, like that sort of stuff has always interested me, like unlocking hidden truths or relics of the past. And there's a TV show that I had forgotten they had come out with, and it's on Disney Plus. And I like didn't go to it immediately back 6 months ago or whatever when it came out because I didn't have Disney Plus or didn't know how to log in or whatever. But I went out of my way to do that, and I've been watching that at like 3 a.m. when I'm up with the baby, mostly like feeding her in like 30 or 45-minute increments. And it's been really good. Like it's definitely Disney. Like it's like slightly childish, slightly like just a little, but like has a Disney feel to it. But it's still like has all the history references and stuff. And they actually like in one of the previous episodes came to Memphis to Graceland because there was a clue and Elvis was involved, which was really interesting. But that's been fun to watch. So it's, I forget what the like subtitle is, but it's National Treasure Edge of History, I think maybe what it is. But it's on Disney Plus if anybody's looking for something to kind of watch, sit back and watch and have fun sometimes. And then I will plug the Learn, Build, Teach Discord. So we've had a few like fun sessions recently. On Thursdays, we have a community hour where we did like an intro session. Everybody just kind of introduced themselves. Last week, yesterday, we just had a casual conversation. So we just hung out and chat. And then on Fridays, we do wins of the week where we just help each other celebrate our own individual wins and the wins of others. Because most of the time, all of us forget to take time to appreciate ourselves and celebrate our success. So you can find that at learnbuildteach.com. And there's a link to get to Discord if you're interested.
I can second that plug. It's a great community, even if I have gotten busy. I haven't been in there to chat with folks in a few weeks now.
I know what it's like.
All right, I had a few minutes. I definitely have a plug. My pick is kind of funny right now because I haven't really been doing we're getting ready to sell our house and then consider moving. So in my free time, I have been mostly cleaning and gardening to make the house look nice for pictures. And so it's not a physical pick of any kind, but man, clean your desk off. It feels amazing. It's my environment is so clean right now, and I feel so zen at my desk today. And I don't even want to admit what my desk looked like prior to this effort. And so don't wait until somebody's going to come take pictures of your house to clean out your zen mental space and just get rid of stuff. And then I'll plug Wix Headless because I would love more people to try it. I'm going to put in the chat for you to share. This is my favorite kind of demo template we have right now. And it's like a Next.js front end connected to a Wix bookings backend, and it has a whole README in there for how to set that up on your own. But you can clone that and play around with it. And we just really want to hear people's feedback and how it is and what they need and what's working and what isn't. And it's only been released now, gosh, for like almost exactly a month. So we're just really interested in starting to get some folks using it, building, playing, and so the team really knows where to go next and what's working for folks and what they want more of.
Love it. Just because you're here, I'm going to do one other pick. And it's this really cool yoga mat that I got from Wix
For your baby.
at Render. If you know, you know. And on that note, we're going to wrap up the podcast.
All right.
Tom and Amanda, thank you for joining. Great to see you a couple weeks ago. Hopefully I'll see you again in person sometime in the near future, and I'm sure we'll be able to work together on more cool Wix products and announcements and stuff in the future as well. So thanks everyone for listening in. If you enjoyed the podcast from the audio perspective, make sure to leave a rating and review to help other people find the podcast. We can continue to have on amazing guests like Tom and Amanda. In the meantime, that's all we got. This is the awkward moment where we're still live. And now we say bye to everyone else. So that was the official end of the podcast. So bye everyone watching, listening. Thank you all for being here and hanging out. Jonathan, quick question. How do I reach me outside of this chat? James Q Quick on basically anything social. And then you could join the Discord at learnbuildteach.com as well. So cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate it. Talk to you all later.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice